My name is Melanie, and I did 5 years, 6 months, and 23 days at the Hilltop Unit. I actually went to prison because I had a heroin addiction, but my actual crime was I was in a high-speed chase. I led the police through 3 counties. The police shot at me 5 times from 5 feet away. I was dodging bullets, and I ran out of gas 3 counties later. But that was what my original charge was. So they originally charged me with attempted capital murder on a police officer, and then they dropped it to aggravated assault because the car was the deadly weapon. And I ended up getting a probation for that, but I violated my probation and it sent me to prison on that charge because I went back to using drugs. Being away from my family was the hardest, being away from my kids. I'm really, really close to my mom, so that was really the hardest, actually. I don't even know how many times I was in county jail. I have no idea. I lost track of those numbers, but I went to state jail 3 times. I went to Safe P Therapeutic Drug Community twice, and then I went to prison. And it's all because I would think, I've established this relationship with God and I can get out and it's going to be okay. But then all these things were coming at me when I got out, plus, feelings I hadn't dealt with, things that I hadn't dealt with in my past. And so when those things would arise, I would go right back to using drugs again, or I would get in a relationship with the wrong guy and essentially end up using again and going back to jail. This time, well, I made a decision, I'm going to utilize this time in prison and I'm going to get an education. I had so many regrets about not being able to go to college because, I lost a scholarship due to an addiction. So I got in school and utilized my time there, and then I got in a faith-based dorm. And I got the opportunity to be surrounded by women who were trying to do the same thing that I was trying to do, because there's so much going on in prison, and so we got to be alone with ourselves and with God and with other, women that are like us to try to do the same thing. And I got to know myself, those old hurts, I went over those and, I talked about it with God, and I learned who I was in Christ. I learned who the enemy was, and what he was trying to do because, God had a plan for my life, but the enemy had a plan for my life, and I learned what my triggers were. Like the enemy, he used the same thing on me over and over and over again, and I always fell for it, but I learned what they were. And I learned that God, was for me, and he wanted me to have victory, but I had to have a plan. When I got out, I had to know that those things were going to come at me, and what was I going to do? Like, for example, God gives us a brain. You use common sense. You don't go back to old people, places, and things. But sometimes if you have to go report on parole and it happens to be in an area you used to do drugs in, take somebody with you, Or if money is your trigger, get a pay card and give it to your mom, and don't even touch the money until you learn how to be out there, and have money. So I learned what my triggers were, but my biggest trigger, I think, was men in relationships. So I stayed out of relationships. I don't think anybody should be in a relationship when they get out of prison for at least 2 years, at least, because you don't know who yourself is. So I learned who I was, and I established a relationship with God. That's what was totally different. Didn't want to hurt my family anymore. My mom basically raised my kids, She's the one that bought their school clothes. She's the one that put braces on their teeth, She's the one that took them to church. I didn't do any of that. My mother was so faithful. She came to see me every month for 5.5 years. And I couldn't hurt her anymore. So I kept good on my promises this time. I got out of prison one time, or not prison, but jail, and it was like, so you're going out tonight? Here's all those letters you wrote me, And I still walked away, but I really changed this time. There's so many things that come at you when you get out of prison if you're not ready. I lost my dad 2 months ago, and it was so hard to stay clean through that. But If it wasn't for my relationship with God, I probably would be right back on my way to prison. But I learned who I was, and my relationship with God's been solid, and my family's been so great to me. I got through it. I have a good support network of women, women that are where I want to be, having someone I can talk to that has been where I've been and is, doing what I want to do. I mean, as far as their walk and their relationship, it's a little bit more mature than mine, so I have people I can call, which I think is really important for women. Well, I'm sure for men too, but for me anyway. I'm involved in a group called Winter Circle. Winter Circle, they have one in Dallas and one in Fort Worth. They are all ex-addicts is the difference. And I mean, ex-offenders. They're ex-offenders and ex-addicts, not just ex-addicts. So they've all been locked up before too. So I'm also a part of a ministry that goes into the prisons. So I've been doing that and telling my story. But a support network is really important when you get out. If I can do it, anybody can. Oh my gosh, I went to jail so many times. Like, I can't believe my family hasn't just been throwing me away. But if anybody can do it, I can do it. But the things that you're taught, you really have to put them into practice. God gives us a brain for a reason and common sense to use. And the things that I learned, I actually walked them out. Stay away from old people, places, and things. It's common sense. You can't go back to old people and think that you're going to stay clean. Get involved in something positive, but at the same time, don't get too involved to where you're not solid in your relationship with God, because the enemy will keep you busy doing good things too. Balance, proper rest, diet, exercise, just everything is different. That there is opportunities in prison for you to do something positive. You can go to college, you can get in cognitive, where it teaches you your wrong thinking patterns. You can take parenting classes, and most definitely you can get in the faith-based dorm. Those, stay away from anybody that's doing old things, because it's in prison too. People that aren't practicing what the word says, just find friendships that are positive, people that lift you up. Stay out of trouble. Life doesn't start when you get out of prison. Your life is still going on while you're in prison, and you can be making progress while you're in prison. So I would utilize all the programs that they have to offer. And the world doesn't stop because you're in prison. So utilize the time while you're in prison to get to know yourself and to get to know God and who God says you are. In the Word, He tells us who we are in Christ, and to not just believe that with your head, believe it with your heart. I really want to reiterate the fact that, women think that all men are bad. I hear so many women talk about that all men are dogs, and, they turn to women too. And it's really their pickers broke. When we're sick, we pick sick people. So until you learn yourself, you have no business being in a relationship, because you have nothing to offer. And I've said this before, but I see women, and they're praying for this 15 adjective list of what type of man they want God to bring them, and then you couldn't handle that type of man if you got him. Are you that same person? Because he's praying for that same woman with those 15 adjectives. So I think you should get out and learn how to live in the free world first. Get to know yourself. And I was the type of person that if we're going to go out, well, where do you want to go eat? I don't care, wherever you want to go. because I didn't care. I didn't have a choice. It's whatever you want to do. If we're going to decorate the house, well, whatever you like is fine with me. And so it was the coolest thing to get out, and I had the key to my apartment. It wasn't mine and his. I had my own apartment that I got myself, and I had picked out everything in it, by myself. And I walked into something that was truly mine, and that was the best feeling in the world, And I learned who I was and what I liked. And, then you could consider dating after that, but you don't even know if your picker's fixed until you get out and they're living out here for a while. But, I believe God will bring the right people in our path. I'm still single. I've been out 3.5 years, but my standards are way higher than they used to be. So I'm not willing to go back down that road, because most of the women in prison are in prison for being in a bad relationship that led to other things. So that's probably it. I think it's important to know that, the enemy has the basic things that he's going to throw at you, like keeping you too busy to spend time in the Word when you get out, so you have to make time for that. He's going to magnify your insecurities to make you feel like you're inadequate. He's going to bring up those old hurts to bring about feelings so you'll want to use. And if you know those things, he's going to cause disunity in your family any way he can. But if you already know those things are coming, you already know the Word, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, and I can do all things through Christ that strengthen me, and the Word, you'll be okay. But then those other things that come at you, like your dad dying, you have to have a plan for that. And then also learn your personal triggers, things trigger you to want to use, like a smell of a perfume, and it's unexpected, that'll remind you of a guy. And just learn yourself and have a plan for when those things happen, and have someone to call, have a good support network, and it'll be a whole lot easier. I'm Melanie. I did 5.5 years at the Hilltop Prison Unit, and I have been changed by God's grace.